introductions. To my right is Steve Ashdown, our planning advisor today, head of development management. To his right is Joe Swift, who will be making the presentation on the site we're considering. To his right is Paula Slim, our legal advisor, and just around the corner is Anne Biggs, Assistant Director of Planning. On my left is Councillor Sweatman, the Vice Chairman. In the corner are members of Democratic Services who will be taking the minutes and maintaining the technology this afternoon. And around the tables in front of me are members of the committee who will be making the decision today. Right, we move on to item 1 on the agenda, to note substitutes in accordance with the Council Procedure Rule 4. I have no substitutes. To receive apologies for absence, we have apologies from Councillors Prescott and Peacock. To receive declaration of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. If members have a declaration to make, can they please press the pad? Right, I see no declarations. Right, item 4, to agree by general affirmation the minutes of the previous meeting on the 14th of November 2024. Are members happy that I sign those as a true record? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 5, to consider any items that the chairman agrees to take as urgent business. I have none. Before we move on to the substantive part of the agenda, members will probably be aware that the government have made an announcement today on future planning policy, and Steve Ashdown would like to make a few observations before we move on.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so as you may be aware, the government about 2 hours ago published a new NPPF. So obviously, just to let members be aware that obviously offices are in the process of looking through that, and a briefing will be prepared and circulated to all members in due course. In terms of today's application in front of you, we're content, given the recommendation and the assessment set out, that you can go ahead and determine today's application. There are some references to paragraphs within the report which have been superseded. They're not in your update sheet because we haven't had time to do that, but for completeness, we will circulate a new update sheet for committee services to put on the website. But just for verbal purposes, within your report on page 18, paragraph 38 becomes paragraph 39, and paragraph 47 becomes paragraph 48. The wording remains the same, it's just a different number. On page 21, paragraph 60 becomes 61. On page 22, paragraph 182 becomes 189. On page 36, paragraph 180 becomes 193. And on page 40, paragraph 55 becomes paragraph 56, and paragraph 57 becomes paragraph 58. So, Chairman, with your permission, I'll hand over to Joe to give a presentation.
Okay, so we're moving on to item 6, which is DM 232316, land south of Hanley Lane, Longacre Crescent, Cookfield. And I'll ask Joe to make his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just take members through the update sheet first. The first point to note, in recommendation B on page 9, the date on that is amended to the 12th of March 2025, which is the standard 3-month period. Within Appendix A, the conditions, condition 4, 9 and 11 have been amended from pre-commencement to slab level. On page 52, condition 13 is being deleted, and condition 16 is being reworded to consolidate the requirements of condition 13 within that condition. And on page 58, the biodiversity net gain wording has been added, and as well as the informative added for that. And finally, there's just some changes to the plans. The visualisation viewpoint plans have been removed and the double garage plan has been removed as the double garage is no longer provided and the visuals are not being built to. The unit type D1 plan has been updated to reflect the most recent plan number, and unit D type 2, the ground floor plan, has been added, and plot 4 layout plan has been added in line with the affordable housing amendments. The application seeks full planning permission for the development of 50 dwellings with vehicle and pedestrian access, car parking, open space, play space and landscaping at land to the south of Hanley Lane in Cookfield. The application site is shown outlined in red on the plan on the left. The northern boundary of the site joins onto Hanley Lane itself, while the western boundary backs onto the residential properties of Stocklands on the northern part. We then have the first Cookfield Scout headquarters and then the Horsefield Green houses on the southern parcel. While the eastern boundary borders onto Gypsy and Traveller site with residential properties of Horsegate Mews, and there's a specialist childcare facility beyond, while to the south it leads onto open countryside. The site, as identified on the plan to the right, is allocated for 55 dwellings. Therefore, as you can see by the red dotted line, this amends the built-up area boundary of Cookfield. You'll note it only extends to the northern parcel, which is now within the built-up area boundary, while the southern parcel remains outside that built-up area boundary and is being retained as open space. It is noted that before members today, the proposal is for 50 dwellings. This is due to a belt of veteran trees which run along the central area between the northern and southern parcels. Due to their veteran status, they require a larger root protection area, which has reduced the developable area. However, in light of the restriction of these protected trees, officers are happy with this slight reduction in the number of units. The following plan sets out how the houses are going to be laid out. The proposal is seeking to create a central green lung running through the site leading down to the southern parcel. The proposed access road will, as identified in the two different shades, in line with the design review panel comments, the central area has been changed to a shared surface. The access will be gained off Hanley Lane to the north, and West Sussex Highways have been consulted on this and have raised no objections to the proposed access arrangements. And just to note as well that the 3 dwellings on this western edge are coming closer than the 21 metres that we would normally expect. However, these are all bungalows. We've also put a condition on to require the boundary treatment to ensure there is appropriate screening between the two, and we've also withdrawn the permitted development rights of these properties, and therefore we're satisfied that this would not result in significant harm to neighbouring amenities. As earlier mentioned, we can now clearly see the line of this mature trees and the setback that there's been provided from this development from them to ensure they are protected. The proposal is also including extensive planting along the northern, central and eastern boundaries. And while the southern area will remain as an open area, you can also see that their attenuation ponds are being proposed as part of this. Will also allow for surface water runoff to be dealt with and also provide biodiversity enhancements. It's also worth noting as well that there are public rights-of-ways through this southern section which will be retained. And on this plan on the left-hand side, you'll notice there's an area identified in blue here. This is a local equipped area of play that's been provided as part of the proposal. This is considered to be of benefit to the scheme, and also with its location, it's considered that there will be sufficient overlooking for natural surveillance of this area. The 10-year plan here just sets out how the affordable housing will be provided. The blue dots are the social affordable rent. This will be providing 10 of these units, and the green dots are the first home, and the proposal is providing 5 first dwellings, first homes. The housing officer has raised no objection to the proposal, and the proposal is considered to be fully compliant with the affordable housing policy. So there's quite a few different house types. As set out within the design review panel's comments, they consider that this proposal drew on the richness of Cookfield's vernacular, provided contemporary interpretation of a Kentish oat house, and were beautiful, and therefore would create a sense of place. Due to the large different types of the dwellings, I'm not going to go through all of them, but here's just a few of the examples to just give members a bit of a flavour for what will be provided. Here we can sort of see the 2-storey style dwellings. Here's just an example of the bungalows to be provided. There's a 3-storey dwelling. And this is just an example of the corner plot property. Full details of sustainability credentials are set out on page 45 within the report, but just to note that the dwellings will be providing PV panels, as you can clearly see on the roof identified here. They will also be using air source heat pumps, and the applicant is committed that all dwellings will achieve a minimum of B EPC rating. And then just an example of the bin and bike stores and the shed. And finally, we just have an image of the single garages. To show these in context, we have some street scenes here. The first one is looking east from the central green lung, and the second one is here looking north from between the two north and south boundaries, and you can see the central lung within the middle. Section C here is the view from Hanley Lane looking south. Section D is looking west from the green lung. And then section I is looking towards the bungalows. And the final section is looking south from the central element of the right-hand block. We also have a couple visualisations of how it would appear once built. And finally, we just have some site photos. So the first one here is looking east along from the access point, and looking west towards Cookfield along the access. And the single photo here is of the southern parcel that is to remain as open space, while the next photo is looking northeast along the northern parcel, and looking north along the northern parcel where the access would be located within this sort of location. The main reasons are set out in the report, but just to highlight a few key points. This is an allocated site. The proposal is considered to be an appropriate design, and as set out within the design panel comments, is considered to create a sense of place. Affordable housing is being provided in line with the current policy requirements. The proposal will be providing 10% biodiversity net gain, which, due to the date of the actual submission, it was not mandatory before it came into effect, so it wasn't actually required to provide that 10%, but we are achieving it on site. And the veteran trees that separate the north and south parcels will be protected as part of this development. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed in Appendix A, and the completion of a satisfactory legal agreement to secure the necessary affordable housing, infrastructure and biodiversity net gain. We also have a recommendation B that if the satisfactory planning obligation has not been completed by the 12th of March 2025, it is recommended that the application is refused at the discretion of the Assistant Director for Planning and Sustainable Economy for the following reasons. 1, the proposal fails to provide the required affordable housing and infrastructure contributions. The application therefore conflicts with policy DP20 and DP31 of the Mid-Sussex District Plan, policy SHN of the Mid-Sussex Site Allocation DPT, and reason 2, the proposal fails to make provisions for securing biodiversity net gain. The application therefore conflicts with policy SHN and SA23 of the Mid-Sussex Site Allocation DPD and policy DP38 of the Mid-Sussex District Plan. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Right, we have 4 speakers, and just to advise the speakers, you have 3 minutes. I will try and indicate, as long as I can see the clock behind heads, when you have 1 minute left, and when the time expired, I would ask that you wrap up in 1 sentence if you haven't finished your presentation, please, but I'd imagine you've probably timed yourselves. Right, the first speaker is Councillor Adrian Podmore from Cuckfield Parish Council. Would you like to take a seat, and the time starts when you start to speak.
Thank you, Chair. The Parish Council notes that while it has endeavoured to engage positively with the District Council and developer, it has felt frustrated that its submissions and recommendations appear to have largely fallen on deaf ears, typified by the fact that the PC was not informed about this meeting and only found out through our local councillor. The PC objects to this application on 4 grounds: policy, layout, design and environmental impact. Policy. We believe that the proposed development does not comply with policies in the Mid-Sussex District Plan or Design Guide or the Cuckfield Neighbourhood Plan and Village Design Statement. 2, layout. The layout is not sensitive to the landscape setting, does not enhance the national landscape as required by policy SA23, and does not adequately consider the far-reaching views from Hanley Lane to the South Downs. Further, some existing dwellings only have a 14-metre gap to the development against the recommended 21 metres. We contend that there will be unacceptable harm to the current residents should this be permitted, irrespective of the type or height of building erected. Design. The building design is not appropriate for the setting. In particular, the inclusion of buildings greater than 2 stories is completely inappropriate and simply not in keeping with any other part of the village. The Grade 2 listed old hospital building was built for that purpose alone and cannot therefore be considered representative of the village. Rather than setting harmoniously into its environment, this proposal will create a jarring, discordant urban wall which will materially demean the landscape around it. The proposal uses little Sussex vernacular architecture. While we should like to remind the Mid-Sussex Design Review Panel concerning its comment that Kentish Oast House designs give the proposal a sense of place, that we are living in West Sussex, not Kent, that hops have never been grown here, and that the designs are indeed a pastiche. Environmental impact. The PC notes that there will be a 34% loss of habitat.
1 minute left.
Which is unsustainable. Putting up bird and box is pointless if there is no wildlife there to use them. While it is accepted this development precedes the mandatory requirement, we would contend that the officer's report is confused, as the existing policy requirement for no net loss on site allows for offsetting only in exceptional circumstances. It is not at all apparent why these would apply here. It also appears that the developer will be buying BNG credits from a Kent-based company, so Sussex loses all round. A design to reduce the 34% loss would have been more in spirit of the policy. If the committee is minded to approve this application, the PC would welcome the southern area becoming public open space and would hope that the S106 can include a clause to hand the site over to the PC. In conclusion, the Parish Council urges this committee to refuse this application on the above grounds, in addition to all the representations made in the last couple of years. This could have been a landmark development in sympathy with the surrounding area, but instead we have proposals which clearly do not respect the village or its surrounding landscape. Thank you.
Excellent timing. Thank you very much. The second speaker is Mary Legaladec. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. I don't think I need to worry you about the 3 minutes by the look of your presentation.
Okay, I'm ready. I am by no means a public speaker, but I have been left no choice but to stand before you today as the owner of 9 Stocklands Close and on behalf of 11 Stocklands Close. We have simply been ignored by all parties in this proposal, albeit a footnote in the report and then disregarded. For those that are not aware, our properties currently enjoy uninterrupted views of the fields and trees which this proposal seeks to build on. We understand the need for houses to be built. We simply do not wish for the properties to be built against our gardens. I have lived at 9 Stocklands Close for 17 years. I specifically bought my house for its semi-rural location and the views that I currently enjoy. We strongly disagree with the reduction in the garden lengths on units 1, 2, 3, down from the recommended 21 metres to 14.5 metres, a 31% reductions. Our gardens run perpendicular to our properties, and this will bring units 1, 2 and 3 extremely close to our back doors. The committee have acknowledged in points 12.59 that 9 and 11 Stocklands Close are most likely to be impacted by this proposal, but then disregard our concerns in the same point with no apparent consideration given to all. No one has communicated with us to discuss our specific concerns at any point throughout this process, and it has been decided on our behalf and by all concerned that the proposal should be approved. At this point, the large mature oak trees have been afforded greater protection than we have. In a 5-hectare site, half of which is being left undeveloped, it's incredible that it is necessary to impact the living conditions of surrounding occupiers so significantly. Surely plans should have accommodated consideration for the neighbouring properties. To reiterate, the minimum recommended back-to-back distances have been eroded by 6.5 metres, with the closest point being just 14.5 metres from us. This is unacceptable. Further assurances to restrict future permitted development of these bungalows are now grossly insufficient, given the changing legal framework. Recent media reports state, quote, local councils will be blocked from preventing loft conversions and extra stories being added to the family homes under Angela Rayner's massive overhaul of planning laws. That was in the Daily Mail 10th of December. Future permitted loft extensions on plots 1, 2, 3 will cause significant harm in the terms of an overlooking and a loss of privacy. Minimum recommended distances should be absolute in this case. It was the council that agreed, publicly stated, quote, it is agreed that the site provides sufficient opportunity to sensitively locate new residential development to ensure no significant impact on the living conditions of surrounding occupiers. If this plan is approved, as it will have a significant impact on our living conditions. Finally, Hanley Lane is already overstretched. More potholes, more accidents, more flooding. Additional cars will only exacerbate what is already a dangerous situation. Thank you.
Suzanne Graves. Again, your 3 minutes will start when you start speaking.
My main reason for raising concern and rejecting this application is the loss of biodiversity from a site that has evolved over many years to be a complex and dynamic area of different habitats that will undoubtedly support many birds, small mammals, insects, and valuable flora. Through my work as a garden designer specialising in rewilding, I am involved with a local well-known established rewilding project. In similarity, the area for potential development bears many of the hallmarks of a space that has been left alone from human intervention, but has undergone heavy animal disturbance over many years. This has created a complex environment of thorny shrub and grazed short grass, a rewilded area that will provide perfect habitat for biodiversity that is under threat of collapse in the UK. The large horses' constant trampling and grazing have prevented close canopy woodland developing that would otherwise have grown in this area, allowing thorny scrub, one of the most biodiverse habitats, to grow. By grazing out tough grass and thistles, Soft grass species have emerged, creating a wildflower habitat that provides food for pollinating insects and tiny protein-rich seeds for birds. I often hear owls and see bats flying low in the area. Owls will hunt in this area because it provides habitat for their main food source, small mammals. Bats will hunt in the open spaces for insects. At the same time, nesting birds and small mammals will find protection from predators and food amongst this thorny scrub. 97% of our wildflower meadows have disappeared since World War II. I have watched butterflies and other pollinators benefiting from ragwort, brambles, scabious, agrimonies, field buttercup, plantain, cowslip and campion in this space. Most of these are considered weeds, but are vital to support our declining insect populations. On the Mid-Sussex website, it states new development and land management should facilitate an increase in biodiversity, and the council will continue to set aside areas of public space for rewilding. Also, the council is supporting the Blue Campaign's Rewilding Britain nationwide initiative to help combat this loss by allowing 40 areas in district to rewild. Rather than develop this space, this should be included in the above campaign, as it was already being rewilded over a number of years. In the neighbourhood plan 12.78, it states if significant harm to biodiversity resulting from development cannot be avoided, adequately mitigated, or as a last resort compensated for, then planning permission should be refused. At the very least, any decision should be paused until a full and thorough ecological assessment has been carried out on this site. Thank you.
Of the development is Chris Barker from ECE Planning. And again, you have 3 minutes and the time will start when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair. Members. My name is Chris Barker and I'm Managing Director of ECE Planning, Sussex Planning Consultancy, and we're speaking in support of this application before you. From the outset of the project, we have worked collaboratively with council officers throughout both the pre-application, design review process and also post-submission to create the proposed scheme in front of you. The proposed development has been fully landscape-led in line with the Site Allocation Policy SA23 of the Site Allocations DPD. The southern portion of the site remains entirely undeveloped, providing open space for formal and informal recreation whilst protecting the veteran trees and valuable habitats. Working collaboratively with the council, the application has no statutory objections and has received highly positive design review panel feedback, which welcomed the non-pastiche architecture and draws on the richness of Cookfield's vernacular, outlining that the proposal will have a clear sense of place. The green spine, a central feature running north-south, incorporates tree planting, play spaces and pedestrian paths, ensuring connectivity whilst maintaining a natural aesthetic. These measures not only enrich the visual appeal, but also provide on-site biodiversity net gains and opportunities for community enjoyment. During the determination of the application, the scheme has been reduced from 55 to 50 dwellings to remove built development from the extended buffer zones around the veteran trees, providing enhanced open space and landscaped areas, including natural play spaces and play along the way features. Very careful consideration has been given to maintaining scenic views, particularly those from Hanley Lane towards the South Downs, and preserving the rural character of the area. The Landscape and Visual Impact Assessment confirms that the scheme respects fully the setting of the high-wheeled AONB, ensuring minimal impact on the surrounding countryside. The development also enhances public accessibility through improved footpaths and cycleways connecting the site to the village and the wider area, creating sustainable links for residents while integrating seamlessly with the existing rights of way. The scheme also provides 15 affordable homes, which are tenure blind and fully integrated across the site. The proposal includes a range of unit sizes, including 3 bungalows. The design incorporates energy-efficient measures such as solar panels and air source heat pumps, aligning fully with the Council's sustainability goals. In summary, this is not just a housing development, but a carefully curated, landscape-led scheme that respects and enhances the character of Cookfield It successfully balances the need for new homes with the protection and celebration of the natural environment. I urge the committee to approve this application, which sets a very high bar for landscape-led design in the district and provides much-needed housing and affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, Joe, would you like to come back on any of the points raised by the speakers?
Thank you, Chairman. Just in terms of the biodiversity net gain, just want to make it clear that this site doesn't need to provide the 10%, but we are getting 10%. And as set out in paragraph 12.79, this has been supported with a number of different reports. I'm not going to read through all of them, but we've done quite a lot of ecology work. And in terms of the ecology consultants' comments, they are set out on page 62, 63, 64, 65. But essentially, they have checked all of the reports and they are satisfied, as the experts, that the proposal is acceptable in relation to protected species and also the biodiversity net gain proposal that is put before members. I've already mentioned the bungalows along the western edge, but it is the officer's view that subject to that condition to remove the permitted development rights and also to have a condition requiring that screening, that while it doesn't meet the 21 metres, which is not a policy requirement but a sort of more of a rule of thumb, that we're satisfied that with that in place, this will cause significant harm to neighbouring amenities. That's all. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Right, so I open the debate to members and would invite the local councillor, Councillor Avery, to speak first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is a site that I'm very well aware of, and I've been in discussions with Cuckfield Parish Council. I attended the presentation at the Queen's Hall last year, at which I think there was a lot of opinions expressed, which some of which have been taken on board and some which haven't. Looking at things overall, I think the most pertinent aspect of today's presentation and today's events is the release of the new National Planning Policy Framework by the new government, which increases targets on housing, especially in areas such as West Sussex, which is predominantly rural. And I think, we need to be able to fight that off with a strict regime, that regime being the district plan. So as people in this room and watching online are probably well aware, the district plan was reviewed at Reg 19 back in October and is currently with the government again. And one thing I noted from Angela Rain's discussions over the weekend was that she was saying that local authorities would need to demonstrate the district plan and a recognisable housing supply. Now, we've got that, and due to very hard work from the officers and members of the District Planning Committee, I think we've got quite a robust district plan which stands scrutiny. So the problem is that if that district plan stands scrutiny, we've got to abide by it. And as this is an allocated site, it's very difficult for us to refuse this without opening the floodgates to A, to appeals, and B, to unwanted development elsewhere. We can't have things in the plan that we are going to deliver and keeping things out of the plan that we don't want. And we've got to balance the books in both respects. So, all things considered, I think that the design has been developed and has been shrunk from 55 units to 50 to maintain the landscape gaps. I'm a regular walk around this area, and I walk up from Bluntswood, and by the time you get to the top, it's very muddy, and it's almost impossible for most of the year. So therefore, I'd welcome the maintenance of the lower part of the site, and I think the suggestion for Section 106 to maintain that as a public open space, I would certainly support that. So all things considered, I think it's been through the review panel, and and the impact, except in circumstances, is quite minimal, I think. So all in all, I don't see how really we can reasonably refuse this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think, would you confirm that I'm correct in saying that the question of the open space wouldn't be covered by 106, it would be a matter between the parish council and the developer? Would that be correct?
So we have a landscape management plan condition, which requires obviously the long-term design objectives, management responsibilities and maintenance of the open space. If members wanted, we could include that as part of the section 106 as well. In terms of the final long-term management of this space, obviously that would be a decision for the developer. Obviously, if they wanted to have discussions with Cuckfield Parish Council about taking it over, that could be a separate discussion that they would have between themselves, but it wouldn't impact on this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would start by asking a question, because I've been very familiar with this area for such a long time, cycling up to fish in the pond there, and in more recent times I've run across the southern area, which hopefully will be retained. But I was curious to hear that the applicant was saying that there would be cycle paths created, and I couldn't see anything on the plan. And of course, when we visited there on Tuesday, it was a waterlogged area. So curiosity on that. But overall, I'm not very happy with this application, basically on the design and layout of it. I'm not opposed to developing the site, but I just don't think we've got the right solution here with the design and the development. I think we have taken into account the issues of biodiversity in the southern area and other adjoining parts of the land, and I mean it's inevitable it's going to happen, but generally I'm not very happy with the application.
Did you want to comment about the cycle path at all at this stage?
In terms of the cycle paths, the proposal is providing cycle path. You'll be able to use the paths through the site itself to cycle, but it's not proposing cycle paths beyond itself, beyond the site itself. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm the ward councillor of another village.
Sorry, just a second. Councillor Bates, could you turn? Right, okay, someone's turning it on. Sorry, Councillor Jackson, sorry, could you start again?
Sorry. So I'm the ward councillor for Hurstbourne Point, another village of a rural character, and where development takes place in our sort of area, there are certain greenfield sites which are objected to by local residents. But on the other hand, of course, we do need to have more housing, in particular also social housing, and they've got to be put somewhere. Obviously, looking at this design, it does appreciate the sort of need for sort of maintaining certain of the biodiversity and rural nature of the site, and so therefore, I think I will probably sort of accept this site to be developed, especially as it's in our site allocation sort of regime. Just looking at the site, I visited on Monday. It was certainly there very wet and sort of boggy, and of course the site falls downwards in a southerly direction, and now we can see there where the attenuation ponds are on that area below. If they're going to put a play area in that sort of area, then I would like to feel that those ponds are protected against people falling into them, although they are temporary ponds as a result of heavy rainfall. Nevertheless, there ought to be some kind of protection for children so they don't actually fall into the ponds themselves. I also welcome the fact that we have some bungalows on this site. Quite often in new developments, bungalows are not provided, And because it's quite useful for that, an elderly population, they do need to have single-storey buildings for mobility purposes. So I would welcome that as well. So I think overall, it's a site, despite the fact it's going to affect the residents, but I don't think it's going to affect them that seriously. In terms of Hanley Lane, I've used to drive there very, very regularly. It's really quite a sort of busy lane. But I think as West Sussex County Council seem to accept that access there is okay. I'm never prepared to do that. I know when the neighbouring property, which was a special needs facility, we had a lot of parents dropping on and picking up their youngsters. That's less so now. So there's probably less congestion at peak periods on that road. But there obviously, you know, nothing can be perfect. You're not going to please everybody. But of course, as I say, we desperately need housing of all kinds, and this seems to fit the bill.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Chair. I have various questions. If I can come back to this biodiversity net gain, we're told there's a loss of 34%, and yet, as we heard from Councillor Podmore, there shouldn't be a loss at all. There should be no net gain at least. There's no obligation to provide plus 10%, but is that 10% actually after the loss of 34%, therefore a loss of 24%? I don't really understand. Or is it a gain of 44%? I don't understand the logic there. Second question, policy SA Gen requires high connectivity between new and existing communities, but there seems to be no link with the southwest corner to Horsefield Green. Could we have a link there? Will there be a lighting condition for warm white lights to avoid affecting the insects? And somewhere in the documents it said that T20, the big tree on the left there, is going to be affected by the fact that the footpath will be too close. Could it just skirt round the RPA of that T20? Surely wouldn't be a big effort. And will all the paths be resurfaced, and will gates and stiles be removed? And can all these three paths all become public rights of way? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the biodiversity net gain, it's a 10% overall gain. So there'll be 10% gain overall with the scheme. It's not 40%. It is a 10% overall gain that the proposal is looking to achieve. And as identified, that would come through in the biodiversity net gain plan as part of the proposal that we will look at before they proceed, and that has been agreed with the Council's ecology consultant. In terms of the connection at the southwest corner, and this sort of links in with the T20 tree, it might not be too clear, but this path here is the path that we're referring to. It runs along the edge already, but just so, because of the large root protection areas that these trees have because of their veteran status, it does mean that, you know, it will be skirting along and partially into that because of the large area, but because it's a path, the tree officer's happy that every mitigation has been made as possible, and that does link in to a path which then joins in to Cookfield, which currently runs along this section. And picking up on the contributions as well, just to note that there is a TAD contribution as set out on page 41, which was West Sussex will be using for cycle, pedestrian and public right-of-way improvements, obviously to promote the sustainable movements between the development and the local infrastructure. And the paths along the bottom section of the plan are public right-of-ways. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Whitaker.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Podmore for his summary in particular, very eloquent, a very, very good summary. And I always put great stock on the parish council's view and particularly coming to these meetings. So I'd like to thank you, sir, for coming. Some very good points. Your frustration, I think every parish council in the district, probably in the country, can share some of your frustrations. In overall terms, I think this is a very good scheme. However, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And call me old-fashioned, but this design, albeit approved by the design review panel, is certainly not in Cookfield style, to my opinion, a million miles from it. So I'm not quite sure how we can make that statement, notwithstanding pastiches, different styles. Also, 23 house types for 50 dwellings is going to be very hectic, very confused, very difficult to build, and I'm really not sure it's going to add much quality to the Cookfield vernacular. I stand to be proven wrong, as I have been in the past, but with my experience, my gut feeling tells me it's going to look, not great. So sometimes I do worry. I've been in lots of design review panels, and I'm sure the ward councillors here attended the DRP, but sometimes they continue to surprise me. The contributions in total are 775,000, which is significant, over £15,000 a plot. Over half of that is for education, which is fantastic. The other point I liked with the scheme was the mix. In overall terms, 40 of the 50 units are 1, 2 or 3 beds. So only 10 units are 4 and 5 beds. We see so many schemes in the past where there's a much higher percentage of 4 and 5 beds, and we get criticised as a council and as a committee for too many larger units. So it's good to see more smaller units, frankly. So, I commend the officers and the applicant on the mix. Just one point of reassurance, Chairman, if I could get, it's on the public open space. You mentioned about it could be in the 106, and then it was a suggestion that it might just be in the planning condition. So could maybe Mr. Ashdown just confirm, and this is to make sure in perpetuity that it does remain a public open space and there's no future wriggle room for any developer or developers to subsequently not make that an open space. So maybe if you could just confirm that, please, for the officers. Thank you.
Shall I come back, John?
Please.
Yeah. So in terms of, you've got the planning condition, which obviously sets out the actual detailed nuts and bolts of the landscape management. We can put in the section 106 about it being open space, and members should note that that part of the site actually falls outside of the built-up area boundary. So the developed area is inside the built-up area boundary. The land to the south is not, but we can put that in the section 106. I think the point we were addressing was in terms of Councillor Overy's point about maybe Cookfield Parish Council taking on management. That's something we can't put in the 106, but that can be subject to a separate conversation between the developer and the parish council, and that can be done outside the scope of this planning permission and section 106 agreement. But we can put in that this should be public open space.
If it's approved, would members like that to be included in the 106 agreement? Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's pretty unanimous. Thank you. Sorry, had you finished?
Can I just come back on just that one?
Yes, okay.
Insofar as the comments you made about the government announcement 2 hours ago, any future risks, I'm trying to ensure that there are no future risks for that area for potential future allocations. So you know where I'm coming from. So thank you.
But actually, one question on the legal side. I mean, you're removing the rights on the bungalows. I mean, that will have legal status now. I mean, is it possible to say that any subsequent legislation wouldn't actually remove, normally would not be able to remove those rights? Because obviously it is a concern of people if the bungalows were to be built up.
It's a planning condition, so that has its own right, you know, by terms of the planning condition removes those rights. The only way that you could remove that condition from those three properties is via Section 73 application to remove that condition from the planning permission itself. So all we're saying in respect of that condition, it requires the planning permission, so a formal planning application to be submitted to undertake some works which at this minute in time in a property that has full permitted development rights they could do without making that application. So the condition is the condition. It's you know, it's legally attached to this planning permission.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kennedy, I'll come back to you, Councillor Overy, afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, you've got to remember this is an allocated site, and I think the layout looks quite good. I'm not so sure about the actual design, but I quite like the mix of different house types on the site. It's unfortunate, though, that there's a reference to Kent host houses. Quite why that came in, I don't know. It's great that the open space is being retained and all those trees. I think it looks pretty good from here. The biodiversity net gain might be elsewhere, but I'm afraid we're stuck with that, aren't we? We've seen that on several occasions on previous planning applications. The thing that concerns me, I think, is and I'd like to know a little bit more about, the three bungalows in Stocklands Close. We've had one of the representations to say that the distance was, I think, 14.5 metres. The bungalow is obviously a single storey, and there's going to be a screen erected. I'd like to know a little bit more about the height of the screen and what it's going to involve. Is it a green screen of some sort with ivy or whatever? It would be good just to be a little bit more clear about that, I think.
So condition 38 requires details of the proposed boundary treatment and screening to the west and rear of those plots between, so they have to submit details for approval. So they're obviously, developers here today are aware of this concern, so they'll be looking at options of what they would come in with, and they would come back to us with appropriate screening to overcome that concern. But we don't have the final details at this stage, but it has been secured by condition, so it will be required for occupation of those units.
Okay, well, it was paragraph 38 I was looking at, actually, on page 58. And that's what raised the question. I just wondered what was planned. But if it's not clear yet, then there's no height mentioned. For example, it's not going to be a 2 or even a 3 metre fence. Screen.
We would need details to be submitted to us and approved, so we would have some control over what is put in there, but we would need to make sure what was provided was to fulfil its intended purpose to help provide that level of screening between those properties. So we need to be satisfied with what the developer put forward was appropriate in terms of, obviously we're looking at making sure there's no harm to their amenities, so we'd need to make sure that it was to a correct height that would ensure that. But we haven't got any details at this stage. It's something that will be provided as part of that condition prior to their occupation.
Yes, I noticed that there's been no occupation until that's sorted out, in accordance with paragraph 38. Right, thank you very much.
Councillor Overy.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just one more thing which I didn't mention before, and it's following on from Councillor Whittaker's discussion. In terms of contributions, there's 3 items of particular note. There's 57,500 to sports facilities at Whiteman's Green or Cookfield Recreation Ground, almost 33,000 to Cookfield Scout Group or the Village Hall or Queen's Hall or Village Hall facilities within Cookfield, and a local community infrastructure of 37.5 to be confirmed with Cookfield Parish Council. So I'm very aware of demands for all those things in the local community. So obviously as part of this development, that's most welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think what we've really got to consider is that this is an allocated site, SA23, and our main consideration is, does this substantially comply with the conditions that were laid down by the inspector? And I think that's the question that that members have got to ask themselves, you know, unless it deviates very dramatically from what the inspector suggested, we would have a problem if we didn't actually approve this site. So that, I think, is the primary issue that members need to consider. Do any further councillors wish to speak? Councillor Bergreen.
Thank you, Chair. Overall, I'm happy with the development of this allocated site, particularly pleased that it includes smaller units and bungalows. My only concern is really the closeness to those 3 bungalows. I think it's a shame that it couldn't have been a bit further away. I appreciate it might be possible to put in some screening and so on, but a bigger distance would have been a lot better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, if no further members wish to speak, could I have a proposer for the recommendation?
Proposed, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Councillor Sweatman, the seconder for the proposal. Sorry, Councillor Jackson, thank you. Right, if we could move to the vote, please. Right, the vote is closed. There are 8 votes in favour, none against and 2 abstentions. Therefore, the recommendations, which for the benefit of people in the gallery and watching, I will read out. The recommendations on page 9. It's recommended that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions listed in Appendix A and the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement to secure the required infrastructure contributions, affordable housing and biodiversity net gain. Recommendation B, if a satisfactory planning obligation has not been completed by the, and I think that's amended, isn't it, to the 12th of March 2025, it's recommended that the application be refused at the discretion of the Assistant Director of Planning and Sustainable Economy for the following reasons. The proposal fails to provide the required affordable housing and infrastructure contributions. The application therefore conflicts with policies DP 20 and 31 of the Mid-Sussex District Plan, policy SA General of the Mid-Sussex Site Allocation DPT. The proposal fails to make provisions for securing biodiversity net gain. The application therefore conflicts with policy SA General and SA 23 of the Mid-Sussex Site Allocation DPT and policy DP 38 of the Mid-Sussex District Plan. Right. There are no other matters to be considered today. Next, item 8, questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2, due notice of which has been given. I have none, so I close the meeting at 2:59. And thank you members and officers for their attendance, and also the speakers.